Hi, it's Adrian Gonzalez, president of Adalante SEM and host of Talking Logistics. And I'm here at the MercuryGate Velocity 2019 conference in Las Vegas, where I'm one of several hundred attendees here at the conference, looking to learn and network about what's happening in the world of transportation management and logistics for both shippers and 3PLs. And as you can imagine, one of the big topics of conversation is, aside from the technology side of things, is what's happening in the world of transportation, specifically as it relates to capacity. 2018 was a very challenging year for shippers and 3PLs with regards to, finding, quality capacity. And certainly now in the first part of 2019, a lot of companies are really looking for smarter ways or more efficient ways to find capacity. And someone that's going to share some insights and advice with the audience is going to be Shelli Austin, who's joining me today. She is the president of InTek Freight and Logistics. And tomorrow she's going to be presenting on being creative with capacity as a 3PL. And so we're going to just briefly talk a little bit about some of the insights and advice that she has to offer. And so Shelli, thank you for making some time to be with me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, Shelli, before we kind of dive into the topic, I'm always curious how people got involved in this industry to begin with. So why don't you tell us a little bit, briefly, a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with transportation and logistics industry, and what your current role and responsibilities are there at InTek.
Well, certainly. So yeah, I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be in planes, trains, and automobiles. I can tell you that. I actually went to school and got a business degree and got out into the work world and ended up in a temporary position. I was so temporary that my badge had a blue box. I didn't even earn a picture on my badge. And they put me in, at this time, the company, it was BrightPoint. They were the largest wireless distributor, and now Ingram Micro. And they didn't have a transportation department. And so I was put in to audit freight bills, paper freight bills. Yes, I know I'm aging myself, but literally just nothing but stacks of paper freight bills. And so I just fell into the transportation industry. And from that point forward, ended up being the director of transportation at BrightPoint. And so I was a buyer of freight. I was on the shipper side of the world and got into InTek. Basically, we developed the business, my business partner and I, on the things that we found that we didn't like with the providers in the transportation industry, and we wanted to change it. And so that's how we got into the business. And so at InTek, we are a 3PL, just as you mentioned. We focus on three major things. We focus on intermodal. That's kind of where we cut our teeth and built the business on intermodal transportation. We do freight management. So that's where a lot of the TMS comes into play. And we've developed kind of a technology consulting part of our business as well.
Great. What I always find is a lot of folks in the industry fall into this industry, right? Very few people, study supply chain logistics, right, that are our age or our generation, if you will. Now we're seeing more and more, coming up the ranks that have studied supply chain and logistics. Now you're also, even though you fell into the industry, you're also very involved with a couple of industry associations, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So I sit on the board of TIA, Transportation Intermediary Association. That's where a lot of us brokers and 3PLs get together, and it's a very large organization that's out there to educate and teach. And then I'm also on the board of IANA, the Intermodal Association of North America. And again, just giving back to the industry that we're in, and it's a good networking. That's really what this business is all about, is networking and getting good relationships.
No, absolutely. This morning the CEO of MercuryGate, talked about how this is a relationship business and a people business. And when you look at everything that's happening in the world of transportation and logistics, peer-to-peer learning and networking is so important because things are happening, changing so quickly in this industry that that really is the most effective way to really, work together and really understand and kind of come up with the right strategies moving forward to succeed in this environment. So like I said in my opening remarks, 2018 was a very challenging year for shippers and 3PLs in the transportation market, especially when it comes to finding capacity.
Mm-hmm.
How would you characterize the state of the market today? Is it getting easier or harder to kind of find capacity now in 2019?
So it's funny because I think that it's everybody will say that it's easy and it's softer and it's totally different. Yes, it's a softer market, but it's definitely not easier. Capacity has different facets to it, and so last year it was very hard to find capacity. This year brings different challenges. So this year you have to be smart and have the right capacity, because when things are softer and when the market does kind of take a shift, Do you have the capacity at the right price at this point in time? And so it's just really being strategic to understand what challenge you're in, and you got to make that shift. Whereas in previous years, I mean, transportation kind of had some norms. I mean, you could kind of bank on certain things, and peak would be in September, and you'd be able to kind of roll with the punches. And it's the new norm. There's not a norm, so you just have to figure out which market you're in, and be creative with how you're going to be in front of the competition to serve your end customer.
And I think as we've seen, time and time again, I mean, all it takes is some kind of natural disaster, a hurricane, or a major player to go bankrupt, or whatever the case might be, to create disruptions in this market. So it's the ebbs and flows are constantly coming and going. So I mean, when it comes to the right approach moving forward, I mean, is it fair to say that the old way of doing things are no longer effective? I mean, what are some new approaches or strategies companies ought to be thinking about in terms of how they find and manage capacity effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the old ways are definitely out, as I mentioned with my stacks of invoices that I used to audit. I mean, think about we say it was that far in the past, but it really wasn't. In the past, where we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the TMS systems to really efficiently and effectively execute the transportation business. Everything was off of spreadsheets, and it was stacks of papers and phone calls, and you would have to make a bunch of phone calls to figure out if you could find what capacity or the right capacity. If you had to do that today, you wouldn't be in business, because you have to make a decision very quickly and promptly to be able to service the end customer, or you won't have that customer because they'll move right on to the next solution provider. So it is very different, and I'm not, it's a struggle to figure out how somebody operates effectively today without a good, strong technology platform.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I mean, the role of technology, obviously is growing, right? You've got, continued evolution of transportation management systems, and even the underlying technologies will be, broader emerging technology. We heard about blockchain earlier this morning, artificial intelligence, machine learning. I went to sessions earlier this afternoon on business intelligence and analytics. So all those things seems to be coming together, and that needs to be part of this whole thing, right?
It really does, and I think it's a matter of, it's a certain aspect of this business that's still luck. I mean, but there's a lot, you have to have luck with some strategy. So you have to build a little bit of strategy in that. And in the strategy, where in transportation, it used to be a little, you would analyze and look at what you did last year, and measure what you did last year, and then you would figure out what you're going to do next year. Now you have to figure out all that beforehand. I mean, that's what's really big in the technology space right now is business analytics, predictions. How are you going to stay ahead of the curve and stay ahead of the market to figure out how you can effectively execute for what's to come? And I think that's very important. You don't want to get too lost in the advances of technology to where you go down a wrong path. But if you're not nimble and stay in front of where you need to be, then you're, again, like I said, you're going to fall behind. To me, I always feel like you just implement something new and you're 2 years behind where you should have been. And so that's the struggle with technology, but you have to be in front of it or you're just not going to survive in this market.
Right, and so technology is obviously a critical enabler, but there are other aspects, right? The people, the relationship business that we talked about, so having effective communications with the customers as well as the carrier community, keeping that pulse on the market. I mean, are you seeing companies kind of taking a more integrated, holistic view of their transportation operations, and perhaps a more longer-term view? I mean, those that are a little bit more progressive in terms of how they're approaching the transportation operations and strategies? Yeah,
I think some of them are taking a longer view and some of them aren't. So I think this leads to the capacity that we talk about. It really depends on what's going on in the marketplace at that point in time. So a lot of people were taking longer approaches and views, and you had the annual RFPs and those types of things. And then all of a sudden the market changes and everybody decides that they're gonna, wait, we can't have an annual RFP. We got to move it up, and we're gonna do one now, and then we're gonna do one 2 months later because it dropped again, and then we're gonna keep doing it. So I think it's really a matter of understanding and not jumping to what's going on immediately and changing your whole focus and your whole model. You have to be nimble to change your model. We heard that earlier today in one of the speeches, and again, we heard about all the advanced technology, but we also heard that if you jump too quickly, then you could be in trouble, because it has to be widely accepted on all these new technologies. So I think that it's interesting whether you're a shipper or whether you're a 3PL, kind of how you embrace the next steps and what's going on with the technology.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, I think I often refer to the transportation market as a pendulum, right? Sometimes it swings in the carrier's favor, sometimes it shifts in the shipper's favor, and if you're constantly reacting, to those swings, you're really not building, strategic relationships, right? Because at the end of the day, shippers need carriers to succeed, and carriers need shippers to succeed. But if it's all about, who can get the edge when the pendulum's on their side, well, each side has short-term, they remember what happened the last time, right?
Yeah, and I think that's funny because I look at it, it does swing, and somebody talks about it's the shipper's world, or somebody talks about it's the carrier's world. I think it's kind of blending and merging. It's not one person's world anymore. I mean, I've always said that our competitors are our customers and our partners. I mean, it really is not he or she or one side or the other side anymore. And so, for instance, in this market where people say it's the shipper's market, well, maybe it's the shipper's market, but it's a dangerous step for them, because when rates are really low and capacity is a bit more plush, they can make really rash, not rash decisions, and then you get unsafe. So that's where you need to partner up with the 3PLs, and kind of everybody partners together. And that's actually where people grow the most, is when you don't worry about his world or their world and the pendulum shifting. You understand the market as a whole, and you work together on a common goal. So I think that, and again, the technology in that instance is really what comes into play there. We talk about, if somebody's going to say, I want the lower rate, the lower rate, the lower rate, and then they go out and get capacity for that lower rate, if you make quick decisions like that for the lower rate, you may be making decisions that cost you money in the future, because you didn't do something, you didn't really take the steps you needed to take. And that's why technology is good, because it keeps you nimble and quick, but yeah, it's protecting you on the back end too.
Right. And one of the things that we're seeing today is that, yes, cost management is always important, and being cost competitive is important, but we're seeing, more and more operations being focused on customer experience, whether that's on the consumer side or even on the B2B side, competing on that front. So service, not to say service has never been important, but in some ways service is as important, in some cases even more important than cost in this environment, right?
It is. It very much is. I mean, everything that we see, that it's going to how quickly can you get to the end consumer, and what's the visibility to get to the end consumer. So I agree with you that cost is one thing, but the service in the end will outweigh over the cost, not to a grandiose level, but it will outweigh, because that's where we're getting pushed in this marketplace.
Great. Well, as a way to wrap up, I mean, what questions should companies ask themselves to assess whether they're a leader or a laggard when it comes to successfully navigating the ebbs and flow of the transportation market?
Yeah, I think we've talked about a lot of it here, but the leaders are the ones that have an open mind and are nimble enough to make strategy changes when they need to make those strategy changes, and not fall along the laurels of what used to work all the time and rest on those. I think those are the leaders. And I think also, but the ones that understand, and you mentioned it and you said it so well, is technology is great, but if you don't have the knowledge experts, to support the technology, then it's not going to get you anywhere. So I think really the people that are investing in both segments, the knowledge experts and the people, as well as the technology, those are going to be the leaders, and those are the ones that are going to rise.
Great. Well, great advice. And I want to thank you for making the time to chat with me this afternoon, and certainly look forward to your presentation tomorrow.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.